Good morning and welcome to today's webinar. My name is David Newson and I'm a partner at BOS and also the host of our Perspectives podcast. Today marks the 342nd day of working from home, and it is ever present on my mind that we are social beings. I miss my colleagues, I miss my friends, I miss seeing others with shared visions of a better future through my nonprofit work. I know I speak for all of us at BOS when I say we miss seeing all of you too. I would like to express our collective gratitude to the clients of the firm attending today. Gratitude for the opportunity to serve you, your families, and those you care about remains at the center of everything that we do. Thank you. Please take a moment and read the disclosures on the slide I'm about to put up associated with today's presentation. Okay. It is no secret that as technology permeates virtually every aspect of our lives, incredible amounts of personal data are collected and analyzed most of the time to make our lives easier. There is also a world of hackers seeking that very information for personal financial gain. We need not look further than the recent headlines to read about the Apple and SolarWinds breaches to remind us to be vigilant. It is in this spirit that we are hosting this program. As mentioned in the invite, this webinar and Q&A session is the first part of a two-part BOS webinar series designed to cover the basics of personal cybersecurity and will cover risks associated with passwords, email, Wi-Fi and endpoints, texting, and social media. Think of this as a 100-level course or math for English majors. Our next webinar will be more advanced. Stay tuned for the date. Also, just as a housekeeping note, we will be using the Q&A feature in Zoom. So as we move through the presentation, if you would like to submit your questions, at the lower part of your Zoom window, you should see Q&A. Click on that and submit your questions. Leading today's discussion will be my fellow partner, Carol Benz. Carol is the firm's president and chief operating officer and oversees many strategic areas of the firm, including human capital, legal and compliance, as well as our technology stack. Please welcome Carol Benz.
Thank you so much, David. It's a pleasure to be here today. The threat of cyber attacks, as you mentioned, is indeed real, and it does affect each of us. Many of you may have watched Sunday's 60 Minutes segment on the SolarWinds breach and seen your stress level rise a notch or two. It is easy to feel vulnerable under these circumstances, so we recommend separating what you can control from what you cannot control. Today, you'll learn some practical information about how to develop a cybersecurity program in those areas you can control. Needless to say, we strongly emphasize security at BOS. We have adopted a three-pronged approach to security that focuses on partnerships, controls, and culture. First, in delivering services to our clients, we work with established and proven industry partner organizations, and each partner is carefully vetted prior to our engaging them. Second, we have established controls that provide a nearly 360-degree view of our technology infrastructure, which regularly monitor our processes and are set up to alert us of potential issues. We use tools such as firewalls, antivirus and anti-malware software, spam filtering, and others, to name just a few, and we periodically review and audit those controls. Third, and finally, we strive to build a culture of transparency and awareness through which our team members are educated about threats, and are encouraged to ask questions and spot potential issues. We recognize, however, that it is impossible to be absolutely fail-safe. Breaches are, in fact, even more likely to happen at the personal level, in personal email accounts, through the phones we use every day, at our homes, and by way of our online transactions. So our guest expert today will address those four areas. Dr. Tanya Neild is a computer scientist and an entrepreneur. A self-proclaimed geek, she earned a bachelor's in mathematics and computer science from Emory, a master's in computer science from the University of Maryland, and a PhD in computer engineering from Northwestern. She began her career as an applied scientist for the National Security Agency and went on to serve as Chief Technology Officer for Private Client Resources and then InvestNet, prior to founding InfoGreat, an information technology consulting company where she currently serves as the CEO. In speaking with Tanya, I've been struck by the juxtaposition of her deep technical knowledge and her calm, pragmatic demeanor. She's an experienced hands-on programmer, a technology expert, and a visionary with a heavy focus in wealth management, cybersecurity. I think she definitely has the skills to be a hacker, but she instead uses her extensive talent to help people and companies. So it's a pleasure to welcome Tanya. Tanya, I'll start out by saying it's virtually impossible to function in today's world without email. So I'd love to know where our email is most vulnerable and how we can protect ourselves in that area.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me today. And thank you everybody for joining. Yes, email is very, very common, and phishing, which is them sending emails that impersonate or make you believe that it's interesting to capture your credentials, is the most important part. We've seen in COVID that there's been a 300% increase in reported email scams. So that is going up dramatically. And those scams are impersonating Apple, Netflix, PayPal, your bank, Microsoft, Amazon, etc. So they obviously don't look like the ones that you would expect. If you looked in your spam filter, you may see ones that are more predictable, where URLs or the word prescription or seedy sites are immediately captured. But then there are many sites that you wouldn't notice, that would seem normal in your email, to get an email from a Netflix or PayPal or Facebook or what have you. And those are sometimes real and sometimes not. And obviously that's the trick. So we've seen an increase in the number of scams, and they're using those different emails to hopefully either one, have an attachment, a document, an executable that will actually go down to your computer and deliver malware onto your computer. Malware is the virus that sits on your computer. And most of the time, email is trying to actually get this malware down to your computer. That is a significant place where the majority of your viruses come from. And 80% of all attacks are phishing attacks. So when you look at phishing, most people think of email phishing. It is the most common type of attack. There's the generic email phishing, and that's just a statistics game. In that case, the hacker is literally just blasting out. They've downloaded, they've bought millions of email addresses, and they're just sending them out, hoping that you'll click on them. They can be really obvious, and they can be less obvious, like I said, impersonating Apple or Netflix or Hulu. But then there are more seedy ones where you may have a LinkedIn profile. And with a LinkedIn profile, they can tell where you work. They can tell who might be your boss. They can tell who might be your partner. And they use that type of information to quickly generate emails that are more thoughtful and actually reference somebody else that you may know. There are other ones where they have links and they say, maybe it's Carol sending an email, and it says, well, this is Carol, and we're updating our cybersecurity here at BOS. Please re-enter your credentials for your email. And it looks good because Carol obviously works at BOS, and that makes sense. And cybersecurity is very important. So people may click into that email and enter their username and credentials, thinking that that is part of their job. Those are very, very effective ones. And the ones that most people fall for is when they're referencing somebody that you know. So whether it's Facebook or LinkedIn or some other social media site, maybe you've entered a race, you're a runner, you had a 5K time, the other 5K times and members, maybe they'll send you a note from the race. People are using that kind of public information. Maybe you bought a piece of art, maybe you were at a charity event pre-COVID, obviously, and they have a picture of you and who you are standing with in the photo caption, and they can use those names to then send you a more personal one. The whaling is a specific type of phishing where if you have a C in your title, right? If you're a C-suite person, or perhaps you're, you start with doctor, those are good ways for them to figure out that you're probably worth attacking. And so they use that information, again, your title, your degrees and so forth, to figure out if it's actually worth it. So they'll spend more time on a whaling attack than they will on a common phishing attack, because statistically, doctors are great targets. They make a lot of money, don't have a lot of time. And so with just a couple clicks of information around what hospital you may work at or where you're affiliated in charities, they can capture interesting information about your fellow colleagues and send you a personal attempt. So those are much more tricky to figure out. So the thing to do is, when you get the email, if you are suspicious, there's a name that appears in the top of your email. That's just the display name. So that could be my name. It could be the person that you were running the 5K with. It could be the picture. It could be the name of the person that you were just photographed with at that charity event. But that's not actually their email address. And so you actually have to hover over that to determine if that is actually their email address. So you want to not fall for the display name. You want to actually look and see the email address. And many times they'll even do an email address that might be close. So you actually have to really pay attention. Is it Gmail or is it Gmails? They may throw an S on, they may put something in front of it. You have to definitely check the actual email address. If you're clicking on a link, similarly, in the text of the email, it may say, well, click here to enter your username and credentials to make sure that your email has not been hacked. And it may say click here, and the little word here is the text. Again, that's just the display text. That doesn't mean anything. You actually have to hover over it to see where the heck they are sending you. And again, they may set up a site that looks exactly like what you're expecting, but there'll be a couple words spelt wrong in the URL or in the site. So you have to actually hover over the display name, and you have to hover over the text of where they're expecting you to click before you go there and click in. So if you're staying at a hotel and you're trying to connect to their Wi-Fi, and you're staying at the Four Seasons, it'll click here and it'll look just like a Four Seasons website, only it's the Four Season. It's not the Four Seasons. And the URL is just slightly off. So you really have to pay attention to these small details when you're clicking into an email or trying to log in. Many people don't know the difference between malware and spam. And you can think of it as sunscreen and after screen care. So spam is going to actually check before the email comes through that this looks legitimate. And again, if it's, there are a number of obvious ones. Your spam filter is probably capturing tons of emails that are very fake. But the ones that get through are still going to be spam. Spam will get through to you. And obviously that means it's harder to detect. So that's the spam filter. That is checking your email for the known obvious spam. That doesn't mean that it catches all spam. And then the second thing is the malware, and that's going to protect your system should anything try to be downloaded that isn't warranted. So that's what is actually sitting on your computer to steal from your computer or siphon off items on your computer. So you need both. If you happen to click on spam, it doesn't mean that you're getting malware. Oftentimes it does, but it may actually steal your credentials, in which case, the malware isn't necessary. It's actually going out to use your credentials. So why is email so good? If you look at many of the other websites, you'll see something, forget password. And you can click that and it's going to send your email a password change. And so while I may not find anything particularly interesting in your email, by actually getting into your email, I can go change your password to lots of other places. So we consider it the back door. Forget password on a website then compromises your email. It makes your email more valuable. So you really need to pay attention to that forget password. There's not much you can do about it other than be very cognizant that is actually why sometimes your email is so valuable, is because it's basically the gateway to many other passwords. So we do turn on two-factor on your email because of that forget passwording, in which case, if someone's trying to send a email change through to your email, you'll know about it because you would have to two-factor into your email in order to get to it. So two-factoring, for those who don't know, you have a password that lets you get into your email. That password is good until you set it, change it, don't reset it. And a two-factor is a second set of credentials that are typically sent to your phone with a couple of digits, 5, 6, 7 characters that basically change and are sent every time you want to log in. It sends you the 7-digit code to your phone so that you can get into your email. There are particular things around conditional two-factor or remembering devices that are really helpful. It is annoying, almost impossible to have two-factor turned on your phone, on your email all the time, because the number of times we check email could be just, astronomical if you had to two-factor in. If you're two-factoring in, you can remember the device, or you can remember the browser, or you can set it for a certain number of days. That's acceptable. Device memory is very good. But many people think that if they turn two-factor on, then they can go and send whatever they want in their email. So they can send their social security number or their credit card to the travel agent booking the reservations, or send their social security number over to their attorney, etc. Just because you have two-factor turned on doesn't mean that you should send confidential information in your email. So that email is transmitted, it's sitting in somebody else's email. Your attorney may or may not have two-factor turned on. Maybe they're reading it on their phone. Maybe they don't have all the phone credentials set up. That is not something you want to just let a piece of paper fall on the ground. That is essentially what is happening. You do not know where it is going and what the criteria are on the other side. So I do not say just because you have two-factor turned on, you can afford to just send social security numbers and credit card numbers around. It is also saved in your sent on your phone. And so if I were to get into your phone, it would still be sitting there on your phone. I don't actually need to log into your email. It's actually downloaded onto the drive so I could read through that text. So please do not send social security numbers or credit cards, even if you have two-factor turned on. However, if you do have two-factor turned on, you can relax the standards of how often you have to change your password. So if you don't have two-factor turned on, please change your passwords more frequently, particularly your email password. If you could change it at least every year, best practices is to change it every 90 days if you don't have two-factor turned on. Complex passwords with the uppercase and the lowercase, special characters and numbers, very helpful. But you don't want to just change your password to one past your last password. So oftentimes people will say, help me 1, and then they'll say, help me 2, help me 3, help me 4, or their mother's name 1, their mother's name 2, or the year. These things are able to detect, and once your password has been stolen, then they can figure out the pattern of that. So one thing you want to do is make sure if you don't have two-factor turned on because it's too annoying, please change your password more frequently and increase the complexity of your password so that it's actually harder to leverage. So the last one is just checking that your password has not been compromised. Many of you may be using Gmail or Apple, and they have ways to actually check if your password has been compromised. So that's a good starting place, is to double check that. And in the notes on the screen there, you'll see if you collect these materials, you can figure out how to get to the password check up or go into settings and detect compromised passwords within your Apple. Those are good ones.
Thanks so much. Sonia.
Obviously, much of your email and other things are on your phone. So your phones are the next place that you really want to protect. Most people actually get their phones taken in secure locations that they feel comfortable and relaxed. So they may be at work, or they may be at the Starbucks, right below from their office that they go to all the time. They may be at school. It's much more likely that your phone is going to get picked up in a place where you're relaxed and comfortable than in a place where you may have your phone more closely guarded. So I think people underestimate that it's actually at places like work, where someone may be walking through and pick up your phone, or at school, or some common lobby that's shared. The phone password, I do suggest you put on the password, but many people, including my kids, think I sit in my dark trough hacking away. And most of the time, my basic hacking skills are just the fact that I'm a great Google expert. And I can just Google a YouTube video on how to get the fingerprint off your phone. And there's a fabulous video out there of this younger man in his early 20s, maybe he's a teenager, using a gummy bear to quickly figure out how to get your fingerprint off your phone so that they can quickly get it back onto your phone. Literally, it takes about 1 minute. I take your phone, I get the gummy bear, I've got it, I'm in and out. It's no problem. I'm not some massive, crazy, awesome hacker from the NSA. I'm simply watching them use a very cheap gummy bear to steal it. So you do need to protect your phone. And the camera is one place where, if you've noticed, if you're on an Apple phone, they've now indicated green if your microphone or camera are active, or orange. That's a new status to indicate if your camera and microphone are in use. So that's very helpful in terms of security. Obviously, Apple just had their breach, with 3 vulnerabilities in that last patch. So you always need to keep your phone up to date. In terms of how to protect your phone, I've got a checklist here of the items for you. The pin and the face, the voice are the most important. So when you pick up your phone, you should have your face recognition or a pin in order to get into your phone. That is first and foremost. The second thing is that if you put down your phone and you're not using it, it should time out and go back to having your pin. So what is an appropriate timeout? If you are using this for work, typically we would say at work it should be less than 3 minutes. When you put your phone down, 1 minute is best. If you're at home and maybe more relaxed, you could set it for 5 to 10 minutes, but I would definitely set it no longer than 10 minutes because, like I said, it's very easy to get in. So please set your timeouts for less than 10 minutes. And if there's any work on there, it should be less than 3 minutes. Once they've got your phone, the thing they'll try to do is try to get in using the PIN. So there should be your ability to know that your phone has been taken, and you want to be able to wipe that phone clean. So you don't want to sit around and wonder, well, it'll turn up. I've only been at work, so it's got to turn up, and you wait 24 hours to wipe your phone. We typically don't wait 24 hours to wipe our phone. There's no point. Most of that data should be stored in the cloud. Wipe your phone early in that process. If you've backed it up, recovering from a backup now is no problem. So please make sure that you have the ability to actually wipe your phone. And if you don't know how to do that, certainly get somebody's help doing that. So that's your third. The other one is the locked attempts. Those are ranks 3 and 4. Locked attempts means that when they're trying pins on your phone, after 10 failed attempts, your phone will automatically be blocked and no longer allow any more attempts to get into your phone. So you want your locked attempts to be less than 10 in order to get into your phone. That means they can't sit there and go through the algorithm to actually find all options on your phone. The next one is password vaults. I think password vaults are amazing. Many people think, well, if I'm putting all my passwords in one place, doesn't that make it a really great place to breach? It's true that having all of your passwords in one place does make it a good place to breach, but it's a much harder place to breach. And so they'll typically go for your email, use the forget password. There are far better, cheaper, easier ways to go than to try to breach a password vault. So many people say, well, what's your favorite password vault? Dashlane, which comes with most of the apples, the LastPass and OneLogin are 3 of my top password vaults. So a password vault is different, and it may be hard to detect when you're actually saving your password in your browser versus saving it in your password vault. So many times when you're using Chrome or Firefox and you're in a browser, it'll say, do you want to save this password? And you say, yes. Or do I want to save my credit card credentials? And you say, yes. That is not necessarily in your password vault. And you need to make sure that you're going into your password vault and not saving it in your browser. That is the worst place to save a password. It is saved in clear text right on your phone, on your computer, and that's the first thing people go look for. So you do not want to save passwords in browsers. You want to save them in the password vault. And the password vault will typically have a little pop-up and say the name of your vault, and it's something that you have to install as a plugin on your browsers so that it's slightly different. The browser natively may pop it up and say, hey, do you want to do this? You actually have to install a specific password vault. So please make sure you recognize the distinction that you may feel like you're using a vault, but you are not. You are actually saving them in clear text. Means I can just open up the file and read the password right out. So that is very important to be on your phone, to be on your laptop. They synchronize. So if I change my password on my phone or I access something on my my vault, it will all be accessible to me. Geofencing and location services, it's a mixed blessing. Location services are used in many apps. So if you're using your Uber app or you're trying to get DoorDash, it'll try to figure out where you are and say, hey, do you want your food delivered here? Do you want your car picked up here? That can be helpful, but there are settings that say only use my location when I'm actually using that app, as opposed to using that location when I'm not using the app. So you want to be very specific about when you have location services turned on and that you only use them when you're in that application and that that application actually requires it. So for example, Facebook probably doesn't need to know your location services. Uber, yes, you do need location services turned on while in the app. So you should set that, but it can also be helpful. So there's something called geofencing, and you can say, hey, look, if my phone is within 100 yards of my house or 30 yards of my house, then it's safe to use. So they actually have to steal it and take it away from there. And you can use that geofencing for alarms, for security cameras, for your phone. And so sometimes geofencing can actually be used as a protective thing that they say, hey, I know you're farther away from where you're staying and you're not in a safe spot. And that's good. And then at other times you have to make sure that they aren't tracing you to say, hey, I know you're away from your house. I see you in your awesome Four Seasons at Cabo. Let's go attack your house. So it's a mixed blessing, and you can kind of just intellectually sit back and say, does this make sense? Do I need this? If there's no reason you need it, turn it off. If you don't know how to use it, turn it off. Do not assume the best case, assume the worst case. The other thing is when you have your PIN on your phone, there are certain things on your phone that you can do before you get into the PIN. So many people want to access Siri or access their camera or access their camera light so that they can see in the dark. You need to make sure that those notifications, maybe you want to get a little pop-up that says your email has arrived or that you got a text, so you don't have to log in to see that you got a text. Those pop-ups and those things that appear on your phone before you log in are actually the greatest place for most hackers to go. So in each version of Apple going back, there's always been a little backdoor where I could access your camera and take a picture of a QR code or take a picture of a particular thing to enable me to bypass your actual PIN. People can send certain text to you and you click on that text and it may be able to actually pop in again, not having to go through your face or not having to go through your PIN. So those services that you enable and those notifications that you enable on your phone before you actually log in should be very thoughtful. And again, if you're not using it, turn it off. It's just an open door. Those are very unsafe. So you want to make sure the reason you put the PIN on is to put the stuff behind it. And then people then put the PIN on, say I'm safe, and then have their emails flow through onto the front, alerting them of all their emails. If you're getting more advanced, you start to want a VPN on your phone. A VPN makes sure that all of your traffic is encrypted. So if you're sitting at Starbucks and you're on the Starbucks Wi-Fi, please get off. But if you're on at Starbucks and you're on their Wi-Fi or you're at their hotel and there's no cell signal because you're in this awesome remote hotel, got to use the Wi-Fi there. The VPN is a great way to ensure that all the traffic going out is encrypted. And so that's when a VPN really helps. There are specific tools that you can have. I list some of them and you can follow up and get them that are VPNs. VPNs can get annoying. I understand that if you're watching Netflix and you're at your hotel in your awesome remote location and you want to watch the show, it may degrade the quality of the show. It's true. You can turn that off, but turn it back on. And if you can't remember to turn it on and off, then leave it on. And this is more advanced, but it is a great protection because it is making sure that anybody that's on that network can actually make sure. So as you'll see in a subsequent slide, places where it's more congested, you can walk by and actually be in the next room at a hotel or at Starbucks or in a city are more likely because they can actually see if you're on the network and what networks you're on. I can actually just download a free app, walk into Starbucks and see everybody and every device that's easily on that network. So you want to make sure that's where the VPN helps you, is to make sure that if you're on an unsafe network or a network that you cannot trust, that everybody you know on there is safe, then a VPN is very helpful. The voice assistant, not so helpful. I don't know if it's a feeling of help or maybe you guys have better voices. The voice assistant has yet to understand a thing I say anyway. She constantly thinks I'm doing other things. I don't know what vocabulary words I tend to use, but she thinks that I must have a potty mouth or something. Please, unless you have a really crisp voice, the voice assistant isn't as helpful as you think. Turn the voice assistant off because again, that's a great way for people to capture your voice and record important information. So generally speaking, we turn the voice assistant off on the phone. And then the other thing that people do is, if you've ever seen AirDrop, oh, so send me your pictures. We were all on a ski trip together. Can you send me your pictures? And you turn it on so that someone can send you pictures or someone can send you the document without having. That is not the safest thing to leave on. So yes, you may want to turn it on when you're both at home and your spouse took pictures and you want to grab them or your child took pictures, that's fine. But if you're at a hotel at a ski chalet and you want the pictures from your friend and you're just skiing, turn that off and just wait, have them send you the pictures another way. That wireless direct link, the AirDrop, is not a safe thing to just be leaving on. Many people just leave that on. So those are kind of your top 10 ways to protect your phone and make sure that, again, we're going for statistics of the way that people get into your phones.
Tanya, can you talk a little bit about our homes where we live and the devices there, like routers and cameras and alarms? They certainly create vulnerability too. So what can we do to keep our homes safe from cyber threats?
Yeah, great. Unfortunately, this area is going to get a little trickier because we have that much less control over it. So we have two pieces here. One is going to require kind of trained professionals, and one is going to require a leap of faith. And it is very difficult. There's not much you can do about your Tesla in terms of securing it. There are things within the Tesla, but ultimately these things, these Internet of Things, your Fitbit, your Tesla, your Alexa device, your security cameras, they are a little bit of a leap of faith. And I do have to say, at some level, you're going to have to trust the brand that you're working with and make sure that you're doing, that brand is using it, protecting you. The router is a different story that is within your control. And the router and the cameras are the largest targets. So they account for about 90% of the home cyber issues. Connected cameras have increased a great deal in terms of that they're watching. They're watching to make sure if you're home. They're watching to see if they can watch you enter your password the same way at the ATMs. They watched people enter their PIN numbers when they actually entered their ATM card. So there are 83 billion different Internet of Things, basically by, it's just an astronomical huge number. But if you actually look, 5,000 being breached a month, it's a relatively small percentage. So, there are a lot of them. They are getting breached. It is the expected potential of the future. Today, this is not statistically the best place to breach. Your router is a great place to breach. Your camera is your second best place to breach, then your Alexa. The other ones are popular, but less likely to be breached. So, some of it is going to be a leap of faith at your home. One of the things you want to do at your house is make sure you do get it protected, and that means getting a home provider. And so how do you go about getting that home provider? What kind of questions do you ask, and how do you find them? Many people feel like if they get the onesie person shop, and it's Joe, and I know Joe, and Joe's been coming over here, and I can let Joe into my house when I'm not home because I've been using Joe for 3 years, that must mean that Joe is great. And Joe may be trustworthy, but Joe may not have the right processes set up. So security is not a one-time thing. I don't go get it set up. It's a maintenance program. It's like, because I ate a salad doesn't mean that I'm healthy. I actually have to eat my vegetables almost every single meal in order to be healthy. And security is very much that same kind of concept. I cannot just get it one time set up or eat a salad once a month and be good to go. And so though you may trust Joe, Joe may not have the best processes. So when you talk to hiring that person, you need to make sure they have the maintenance program involved. And so is a big company that much better? You're like, I'm a small, tiny little house here. What are they really going to want with me? You do want to have a provider that takes care of homes. They're very different than taking care of an office. And so you want to provide, I'm not saying that Joe, your one person, roaming, security person isn't great, but in either case, whether you choose to go with a company or you choose to go with a onesie twosie shop, you want to make sure that maintenance program is put in place. So the questions that you ask are around that maintenance program. What's your process for maintaining and patching my devices? They actually have to patch them on a recurring basis. That doesn't mean they have to be in your house on a monthly basis, but that does mean that they have to have systems going in and patching your desktops, your laptops, and so forth on a recurring basis. You want to ask about on-site time versus off. That's a good question to ask. If you are going with a larger company and they are bringing someone on site, you want to make sure, how is it they vetted that person? Do you get the same person each time? So that's where the smaller company is better. but the larger company is going to have the better processes and patching tools. So it's really focused around this maintenance. You want to also ask what firewalls they like. You may not know the answer. That's okay. Doesn't mean you don't ask the question. What firewalls, what are their expertise? Do they have a different person that manages firewalls than manages your desktops? That's a good one. If they have a dedicated person that manages firewalls, that's going to be slightly better than if they have one person that just does everything. Because your firewall does need to be maintained just like your desktop or your laptop does. And then the other one is, just like the OS and any of your other service providers, they should provide you reports. What's my warranty? When did you last patch? Can you please show me that all of my patches are up to date? And so you can ask them for reports the same way you ask your advisors for reports. And if they don't have reports, then they probably don't have the process. And so those reports are a way of maintaining and making sure. You may look at that report and not know what to do with it. That's okay. The fact that they produce reports and that they can step through it with you is a good sign of a maintenance program. So that's a great question to ask. The other questions are, how do they background check their employees? Great questions. Do they do it once or do they do it recurring? Again, just because they do background checks doesn't mean, and even if they do them on a recurring basis, doesn't mean that that's a fail-safe, but that's a good best practice. The other thing to do is to not assume that they've done a good job. It doesn't make you a bad person, but you want to trust but verify. So there are third parties that will just go and check from the outside, can I get in? It's called an external penetration test or a vulnerability threat assessment, or the acronym is VTA. And you want to actually cost $1,000. You can do it once a year. Just make sure that your actual home is protected. And when you ask your provider, hey, do you mind if I just get a VTA or a vulnerability threat assessment or an external penetration test once a year? If they say, yes, that's a great idea and they're behind you, then that's a good sign. If they say, no, we'll take care of that for you, I would definitely think twice about it. You like independence of that check. You don't want the people checking themselves. If they say that's overkill, you don't need to worry about that, then probably go to a different provider. Many people ask, is it safe for them to remote into my computer? So if you call Apple or you call Optimum or your Verizon and they say, hey, let me jump on your computer, don't do it. If it's your trusted provider that you've thoroughly vetted and has the maintenance package, it is safe for them to remote into your computer. They should be remoting into your computer on a recurring basis at least once a month to actually do that patching. So it is okay for a vetted provider to remote in. Your Optimum and your Verizon, do not let them on to troubleshoot the router. They will reset that. If you have to, please have your home provider work through it with them, and then they can sweep up behind them and make sure that all the passwords are changed. Because most likely the Verizon and the Optimum router that you have, some weird box, you don't remember where it is, it's in your house, it does something, that password probably is the default password. That's really easy to get in there. And that's where most of the things happen. So please have your home provider sweep through and double check that everything has been changed. But try not to let Verizon, Optimum, Apple into your computer. Only have your home provider do it with you and for you, but they can get in.
Funny, I love the analogy to the eating your vegetables at every meal, because it is much like your health. This is such an ongoing, everyday maintenance program, and so important to find the right team to help support you in making it possible. So that's a great analogy. I'll think of my security every time I'm eating my salads.
Well, the thing is, it's tough. We're busy people and we don't have the time to do it. So when you get to that person or that team, you want to make sure that they're good at maintenance. Many times the programmers want to go into the latest and greatest and tinker and get you on the cool stuff. And that's not really what you want to do. You want the person that's a steady Eddie that's going to put you on a maintenance program and make sure that you are eating your vegetables every day, and that you don't have to worry about it. Your vegetables are served up for you and they taste so good you don't even mind.
Perfect. Perfect. Well, speaking of vegetables, many people would not be surviving this pandemic without the ability to order their vegetables and their food and other essentials online. Online banking and online payments and Apple Pay and online transactions are just how we live our lives these days. They definitely make our lives easier, but tell us a little bit about how safe they are and what we can do to protect ourselves there.
Yeah, sure. So I always find this slide so interesting. You know, all of these things are currency. We think of Bitcoins and dollars and quarters and stuff, but these things have a whole currency unto themselves. And as you'll see, your medical records are your best one. Your insurance card is your best piece. So sometimes people have that stored in their Fitbit. That's a great place to get stuff. So you kind of want to just use this little, currency exchange to determine what you want to keep safer and what you need to protect. So your passports, your medical records, a little bit more than other things. People are always so worried about their social security number. It's actually not actually traded for that much. These other things are traded far higher numbers. When you are transacting, again, you'll see that the places that are more congested, the cities or the coasts, tend to be more commonly hit for identity theft. So, just be more cognizant that if you're in a city or if you live along the coast, you are a greater target for identity theft. And you may be young and you may not be that old. If you're in that sweet spot, great. The younger people aren't paying that much attention. They're clicking through lots of ads in their games and so forth. They're hit, but they're not getting stolen that much. Even children who are very young, 5, 6, most people don't think that those kids are going to get targeted because they don't have much money. That's true, but most people aren't paying as much attention to their social security number or to their bank accounts. And so you want to make sure that if you have kids or grandchildren, that those kids are being protected because no one's watching them. And then by the same token, the older you get, the more you've accumulated. And so you are a greater target there because actually they can actually take more from you. So you do need to check above 70. Multi-factor and conditional is a hard thing here. You need to have two-factor turned on to your banking apps and to any place where you're moving cash. So you want to make sure, in this case, the conditional two-factor that I talked about, your email. So it's conditional, like I'm in my house or I'm on this device. That's acceptable for your email, not acceptable when you're talking about your money. You actually want a hard two-factor every single time. So no lenience on the two-factoring, every time two-factor turned on. You want to make sure that your credit cards aren't being stored on the sites or in your browsers. So you need to make sure that you're not storing that information. Can you store your information at Amazon? Yes, you can store your information at Amazon. Do you need to store it, at your random fitness place? No. Do you need to store it at your random juice bar? No. Do you need to store it in many of these places? No. So, you can use things like PayPal, Apple Pay, instead of actually storing your credentials and your credit card information in all these sites. So I greatly prefer that you don't store your credit card information, but instead you use a gateway like a PayPal, the same way a password vault is, right? You can have your passwords in your password vault. Those things, the security is much tighter on it than if you just store your credit cards in 10 different places. So if you store it, you can use PayPal. That's much better than storing it at the Gap or Lululemon or Brooks Brothers or Ferragamo. So use PayPal instead of storing the credit card. Apple Pay and Google Pay are better than using a credit card. So if you're out and you're buying something at the Fresh Market or Whole Foods or wherever, it is preferred to use your Apple Pay and your Google Pay over your credit cards. But if you flip back one more layer and you're actually transacting online, it is better to actually use a credit card than a debit card. Credit cards have far more protections than your debit card. So if you're shopping online, I do recommend that when you're shopping online, you use a specific credit card just for shopping online. It's not used for anything else. So typically I recommend 3 credit cards. Your recurring credit card that only has recurring charges. So maybe your gym membership, your newspaper membership, your mortgage, whatever is recurring, you can put on the recurring credit card. Then your online ad hoc purchases or any information, when that's the credit card you can store actually out there. You're going to watch that one far differently. And then you can have your one that you use for when you're out and about, although I prefer you put that credit card in and use the Apple Pay or the Google Pay instead of using that. But that's your 3rd credit card. And all of those credit cards you should definitely have turned off for outside the United States. And then you have to alert them when you're going outside the United States. So that's really helpful because there's no reason that your online purchasing credit card needs to go outside the United States. There's no reason your recurring credit card needs to go outside the United States. So if you're one credit card, you have to alert them when you travel outside the United States. The rest of them would not be enabled for outside the United States. You want to make sure that when you are transacting, that you are definitely on a secure network. If I said, do you know every single person on this network and that they are safe? If you cannot say yes, you should not be transacting on that, even if you have a VPN or people say, oh, HTTPS, the little S in the URL, it must mean it's safe. Yes, you want the S on your URL, but please there's no reason you need to buy your shoes at Starbucks on the Starbucks Wi-Fi. Just wait till you get home. There's absolutely no reason to do that. So please make sure that you're completely on a safe network. And then, back to that password vault. If anything were to happen to you or to someone in your family, those password vaults are very helpful. If someone is injured and you need to shut them down, my mom passed away 2 years ago. I didn't change her Amazon password. I was alerted that her Amazon had been actually accessed from her house in her same town. So you do want to make sure that you use that password vault, not just for yourself, but in the event of any emergency, those password vaults can be very helpful. I think that's pretty close. Do we want to turn it over for questions? I know we're running a little close on time.
Tanya, thank you so much for this informative presentation. I think the word that comes to mind the most is vigilance. You just have to be vigilant every single day in everything you do across the board. But you've given us so many insightful comments and action items we can take to control those areas that we can control. So thank you for that. And yes, I'll turn it back to David for the Q&A.
Thank you, Carol and Dr. Neild, for today's presentation. Before we transition to the Q&A session, I would like to share that this webinar is being recorded and will be made available to you soon. We will send an email with a link to the video. Please feel free to share this presentation with those who you think might also benefit from watching it as well. So let's get into some questions. Dr. Neild, does Yahoo have a password checkup function?
I don't recommend using Yahoo. So it's better than AOL. If you are on AOL, please migrate to Gmail and do not use AOL. Yahoo is the second one. It does have two-factoring. It does have some of these things. I do not believe that it has a password checker. There was a link on the page. You can go, everybody thinks, oh, the dark web. The dark web is not actually that scary or that far away, unfortunately. It's like being in New York, one wrong turn and there you are. And so you can actually search. So there are Google alerts you can turn on. So if you are just in Google, you can see Google Alerts. And I do recommend that you put an alert on your name and your family and every version of your name. So, you know, it could be if you're Liam or William, put them both in there. And that will send you an email every time your name is mentioned out there. So you can see if you were in a picture at some charity event, you can see if you were alerted in the 5K race and you had some time. So there's another website that I listed in there that you can go to and actually put in, and it will tell you if you've been breached and if you were compromised as part of one of those SolarWinds compromises or the target way back when. If your stuff was actually released, you would get notified of that. So there are some great alerting mechanisms to say if you've been captured. Everybody wonders, well, so that SolarWinds thing, like, did that affect me? And it's hard to know. And honestly, the number of people that they've had spending trying to recover from the SolarWinds and the number of hackers that were involved in that. But many times you can actually determine if you were swept out in that. And so if you go to that website and put in your username or your email address, you can actually determine, you know, which breaches have affected you.
Excellent, thank you. Let's see. Are the physical hardware password vaults that one can purchase from places like the Sharper Image or other vendors as safe as online password vaults that you mentioned previously in the presentation?
Yes and no. Sorry to give you an ambiguous answer there. Yes, they are. They are, as long as your home provider is also. Many times those aren't encrypting at rest, the information, so they can be accessed. And then obviously, you know, being able to expose those out to many devices, it's better to use the cloud-based ones, because if I'm on my phone and I want to get that password, or I'm on my computer and I want to get that password, regardless of where I am, if I'm using a cloud-based vault, I'm positive that I'm going to be able to have it synchronized across all of my devices. And I'm not gonna be like, oh, I just signed up. I'm on vacation. I finally have time to sign up for this thing, and I forget to put the password in the vault. And so it is far better to use the cloud-based ones, not to say that the home ones aren't better than nothing.
Excellent, thank you. What do you do if there are already passwords stored in your browser?
Get your home provider to wipe them off. There are directions, and you can actually wipe them off yourself, but it's not a one-step set of directions to clear those things. It's about 5 steps to clear them. You have to clear them off of Chrome and Firefox, and each browser has their own. So it's better to actually have your computer kind of cleaned with your home provider to make sure that those aren't there. That should be part of the maintenance program, because anybody could easily by accident click into there. You know, a kid could, a guest could, you know, you want to make sure that they're wiped out on a recurring basis. That's part of that maintenance program.
Many websites allow you to use facial recognition on phone apps. Is that safe to use?
Yes, I do like the facial recognition. And they have gotten it so that, you know, if your eyes are closed versus open, there used to be concerns that when you were sleeping, they could have gotten it, or that they could use pictures. They have enabled it. The voice recognition still is the safest of them. The voice is very difficult to replicate. If the new phishing scam, if you haven't heard, is to call and say, can you hear me? And then you say, I'm sorry, you know, who is this or whatever. If someone calls and says, can you hear me? You hang up the phone. That's just a phishing scam on the phone. The voice recognition, if you can set that up with your bank, that is a great form of security. It's the best one right now, is your voice. But face is
Right,
good.
it looks, thank you. It looks like we are approaching the conclusion of our time with you today. Thank you so much for attending. If you have additional questions, please feel free to contact your client service team if you are a BOS client. And if you are not a BOS client and have additional questions, you may reach me directly at david.newson@bosinvest.com. From all of us at BOS, we wish you a healthy start to the new year. And for those of you celebrating the Lunar New Year and Spring Festival, Sin Hall.
Thank you,
Eat your
everyone.
vegetables.
Yes, eat your vegetables. Every meal.
Thank you,
Bye now.
everybody.
Thank you all.